Thanks so much for being here today. Thanks to you two for putting this together. We thought we would start the day by giving our perspective on our bodies versus platform stacks, and how we can maybe access this question via work. And it's super nice to have seen the amnesia scanner video just now, because we're kind of thinking about similar things in this talk. So just a bit of like boring things, but I think it's important to talk about them. So we're trying to talk about the platform stack here simply in terms of big tech. So in terms of how the software and hardware and data sets and bodies that are involved in the stack integrate into kind of advancing capitalism. So we're really just interested in talking about these kind of work definitions that start to be reframed in the context of, big tech. And the main kind of question is that these work definitions are being advanced and accelerated, and they kind of redefine work as the working hours, but also the hours designated to think, dream, and imagine. And this is something that we'll get to at a later point. But what we're trying to kind of show in this talk and in our work in general is that our bodies, as we know, are captured. Like, this has been kind of discussed for a while now, but now they're starting to be captured by business models rather than image technologies, by scientific discourse rather than image technologies, and by their own creativity. So just some background. On the screen you see 3 stills from our ongoing work called Too Many Humans, which we presented initially in an exhibition called My Life in the Metaverse, curated by Omar Khalif. And with Too Many Humans, we're attempting to visualize the types of new so-called work silos that emerged within, a metaverse that is already here. So as we keep advancing the promise of full body immersion, what happens to the bodies that actively work alongside an emergent platform stack? So what happens to the bodies that actually are trying to make the stack happen or are simply byproducts of it? How do these bodies look, and how do we represent them, crucially? And hopefully we're going to have an answer by the end of this. And it's over to you now.
Yeah, thanks, Anna. So here on the left, you can see a campaign shot of a kitted out Gorillas driver in their freshly new branded workwear, which seems to be the only real contractual offering that these workers are given. We've been fascinated by this for a while, especially by the emergence of delivery work, developing straight out of the power of the stack to capture our collective lack of leisure time and or complete burnout or boredom. But suddenly the promise and challenge is different. In the case of Gorillas, the Berlin-based delivery platform, can the work be executed in less than 10 minutes? Can Amazon now be more than now and as close as possible to right now?
We're already getting another order come through from Dishoom, which is a very nice Indian restaurant. You'll always see queues outside their place. It's very, very busy, very popular. So many.
They still have 8 orders.
Yeah, I'll cancel that one.
Sorry, could be 1 hour as well.
Jesus. Yeah, I'll just take this one.
Thank you.
Thanks. Just went ahead with the one order here. Now, let's see how far away they actually are. 12 minutes, 2.7 miles. Oh yeah, you're right.
The code
What was the code, sorry?
37.
37. Thank you. Yeah. Enjoy.
Yeah, so this immediacy can be achieved, but the cost is real. The cost of real bodies, of course. So in this case, the question of the presence in the stack, otherwise known as the immersion buzzword, is advanced to its next possible iteration via a new model of work. Full-on immersive injury or death, it can't get more immersive than this. Another type of work we've been fascinated by is the emergence of what seems to be a new type of photography, one where the photographer doesn't need to look through the camera and frame anything. These 2 guys are working with a Matterport camera, and It's a camera that essentially captures 360-degree renderings of spaces, which are usually put together to form a walkable and explorable space. It's very popular at the moment with art fairs, real estate, and something that we kept on seeing more and more, especially during the pandemic. It's interesting to see how this type of work and the outcome of it, the dizzying bubble vision-esque experience of spaces, offers and reflects some type of new notion of the public, but also the working public. So through this new iteration of the photographer, is it impossible not to think of the question, where are the workers? Either clicking through the bubble or similar to the case put forward in the book of the Undersea Network, the worker sits in front of the screen offshored with a teapot in the right hand and a phone in their left. Their phone permanently receives messages from an alarm warning software system. The worker operates in a permanent state of a real-time alarm.
So what about the body of workers that are not offshored, but fully captured, fully there and present? And how much does one's body cost, or at least the 4K rigged version of them? In the platform stack, anything has a price. And that is a $25 Amazon gift card. The question of our bodies being captured in the sea of, poor images and, the sea of mass surveillance has been an ongoing one. But it seems that in this type of work, one where one willingly sells their rendered body to Amazon, quite literally, and Amazon then sells their body to a multitude of asset-packed library companies, the body is captured by nothing else than a business model. And interestingly, the business model, like it should, in the accelerating platform stack, feeds back a new set of aesthetics into mass consumption. Our bodies are being captured and our bodies are being fed by yet a more advanced version of the good old aesthetic capitalism. And we're not even present enough to realize it. But it's interesting to see, once again, that the aesthetics of real life work increasingly feed back to us once more via the things we wear. In this case, extraordinarily rooted in reality. The body stack keeps going, but how we observe it and represent it becomes really important. And what is already here and the work that it takes to get there might be a very fruitful way to go about it. And genuinely believe this is one of the best shows that were ever put out in London. So we are in our work inevitably fascinated with workwear. The things that people wear when they work within or in proximity of the platform stack. Here you can see quantum scientists in what are called clean rooms. Unsurprisingly, the work that needs to happen in order to deliver the next possible iteration of computing needs to happen in absolute pristine conditions. A grain of dust would be able to ruin years of research and countless rounds of funding. Here, the worker body is necessary, but sanitized, almost removed, like a perfect scan of itself. Here, the worker, So in this case, the simple white hazmat suit becomes the protective layer. Almost a device one wears to step into a completely different dimension and atmosphere. Just like the sanitized 360 real estate walkthrough, but with real-life consequences.
There's one more feature coming soon that's probably the most requested feature on our roadmap. Legs.
Legs! I know you've been waiting.
So the hazmat suit scientists are at work because ultimately people like Zuck want legs, don't we all? It seems that until the white hazmat suit scientists figure out the big quantum question, the promise of full immersion will still be in question. And the past year has proved that without legs, we can't really walk around the metaverse. It is, however, interesting to question in a platform stack where power, ownership, and locality have been completely redefined, and where the groundwork has been laid, who will be the first to have access to this type of full-body immersion required to make this promise come true? And until then, who are the real-life workers that will continue to have their bodies captured by scientific and technological discourse? The answer, we think, can only come by looking at what is happening in reality, where legs exist so much so that the US military is continuing to advance rehearsal methods and simulations where legs can be blown up without consequences. Bodies on repeat, hitting the reset button, shooting up virtual legs, scan virtual legs, in BODYSTACK where such ZUC and governmental agencies first have access. So here's another example of real-life workers. We met these actors on a project last year in New York, and we quickly came to find out that they have a specialized set of skills and are specific types of actors. They only work for the acting of motion capture, and that became fascinating because most of them are trained in method acting or like theatrical acting. They seek to identify if the avatars that their suited up bodies are rehearsing to inhabit. They live with their inner emotions of being geared up within a system of sensors, and in turn, a series of technicians cleaning up the results of those sensors. It became clear then to see that the work in the platform stack is essentially a stack of work. New labor silos emerging within themselves, each emerging at a pace so fast that labor laws, as we know them, don't apply. Here is an example of those who don't have access. And once again, we can see that the only way to have access truly is to surrender the body to science work. The stack onboards bodies, it seduces playfully while work is advanced in the background. As much as the development of human-computer interaction is welcome, particularly in scientific research in the health space, it is so strange to look at this image to see that the stand-in for one's real body in a standard Epic Games metahuman actor, as much as it gives insight to where medical work has gone, it also gives clues into the big platforms that are continuing to form monopolies over the stack. Who is pitching for what, and what business model gets to capture what body, who gets to work.
AI news anchors are here. This is Ren Xiaorong, the AI news anchor from China who works 24/7. She can talk about many topics, but only the ones approved by the Chinese government. She can't answer anything off-script or controversial. Many more AI anchors are being made all over the world. What do you think of her? Cool or creepy? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to like and follow.
So yeah, the stack has already figured it out. Work can now happen 24/7, no bodies involved at all. Only those that have been given the right script, the right code. In the stack, bodies don't need avatars anymore. They can simply be images that veil, like a hazmat suit, a piece of code that is there to get work done. The stack has come a long way since it needed bodies replacing bodies, where work has simply standing in line, waiting for the new iPhone to come out.
So finally, going back to that question of dreaming and imagining, what about the work of the artist in the stack? What work does it take to represent bodies? What about the hours designated to think, dream, and imagine? This is an image from Chris Burden's performance shoot in 1971. And it is in many ways the predecessor of this question of what can representation do in the face of, well, what he was trying to do, the rapid accumulation of capital in the art world. In Shoot, he got his friend to fire one bullet that hit his arm. So he was asking, how do we move from representation into live action? How will the art market react? Which we know, as Hito Starl noted years later, that the gallery space is the ultimate battlefield. And years later, from the perspective of the big stack, and as we discussed so far, does this model of capitalism even need the animated, living, laboring body as such? It's easy to surrender and believe that one performance seems to have ended all discourse on representation, but as living, thinking, dreaming people that imagine, artists, there needs to be a continued battle to represent. Jeff Wall was photographing a cleaner in the sanitized modern icon that is the Barcelona Pavilion in 1999. Work needed to continue in order to preserve, in this case, a history of modernism, the architect's macho ego, arguably stakeholder in a then budding stack. And so did the work to represent. It had to continue. Years later, Harun Faraki and Antje Eman began their work, Labor, in a single shot. Working across the world conducting filmmaking workshops, they were meant to question, can the lens even capture in one shot bodies working? When does the work begin and where does it end? Can documentary filmmaking even come close to the reality of capturing work? Maybe moments of it, they offered. Quite clearly, avatars are nothing but cadavers. The working body of the artist, in a twisted form of trying to identify, much like the method actors, with some sort of feeling through their work, is there to batter and bruise their digital stand-in. So those who carry the representation forward. In the stack, the bolero humming avatar becomes a version of Burden's bleeding arm. And here's some snippets of our ongoing work. The work that kind of opened up all the thoughts that we just presented. This is MD, the dark kitchen delivery driver, Veronica, the remote work office cleaner, and Nadim, the Matterport camera gallery photographer. For us, work in the stack has indeed become where we imagine, think, and dream, where texturing, rigging, lighting, skinning, parenting, sequencing, prompting, asset buying, and subscribing, and our own clicking hands are part of the stack. And to end on a happy note, we're happy to be captured. I think it's fine to be captured by image technologies, big tech, business models, scientific discourse. It's fine to be captured by our own creativity. As long as our avatars have names, they tell stories about reality and continue to be dressed in workwear, working 24/7 in the BODYSTACK. Thank you. Oh, are we doing a quick?
Yeah, we'll do.
You're okay. Fine.
Is that right?
Yeah. just wondering. Yeah, I've been drinking from it.
Okay, so I guess first of all, has anyone got any questions first? I can see that you can.
I think one thing I picked up that I found most interesting is when Seb mentioned how we're more used to the 3D avatars being more viable options, vessels for the body, but now, for example, that the anchor video shows us that moving images are enough. Just wanted to know what other formats could be enough, or like how do you determine what's enough for to be captured?
I think that question, I think if we push it to like new imaging technologies, is a very helpful thing. Like if we think about diffusion models and like Mid-Journey and all this stuff, because that is the kind of next kind of step that's already here. And what's interesting about that, with like a lot of the work that we were doing with Too Many Humans, we're also kind of prompting it in Mid-Journey to see what it thinks and what it does. And that's where you really question what is enough, because and I'm answering this from the perspective of us doing work and being artists, right? Like, you're always kind of faced with like this question of what is enough in terms of representation and how much these imaging technologies even know about the real world, right? And they don't seem to know too much. They seem to know a lot about everything that's online. And what's really funny when we were, and we wanted to show this, but when we did the delivery driver in Stable Diffusion, and we worked through the prompts, and it was like dark kitchen, and all it was churning out was like these really dark, moody kitchens, like completely
taking
unaware.
It really literally.
Yeah, taking it really literally, like not aware that like this is actually a real life phenomena, right? So I think what is enough is something that we can still be involved with and make decisions on, no matter what that is. And maybe that is enough. A very moody, dark kitchen, that is enough to tell you something about reality. Yeah.
Daniel yesterday talked a lot about
Yeah.
some crazy stuff. So the concept of everything being minimally viable is good enough.
Yeah.
I guess
Yeah,
I
I
was
agree
also
with that.
thinking about the sort of just conscious of this morning, like setting up this mic which we didn't use, and the kind of lag and things like
Yeah.
that. I was just kind of when you were talking about that, it's recognition of a dark kitchen being literally like a kitchen that is dark, like the lag in the system in terms of not actually registering what a dark kitchen is in sort of contemporary life and under like contemporary capitalism, what a dark kitchen is. It's like that sort of lag is also, I don't know, like I kind of feel like maybe that's also this space that we can sort of somehow occupy and do something with. Maybe that's all we've got now in the kind of platform stack is like, but it's interesting that sort of how it kind of reads these terms, I guess. I guess like maybe that's also something that we can as artists and creatives and thinkers, etc., is like push that in terms of like creating like new terms and new things, so that to give us some space and some time or whatever. If that kind of lag space is that, or lag time is that all we've got in a way. Does anyone else have any questions?
I really love how you give a talk about different kind of cases in like BODYSTACK and different platforms. And in the end of the talk, you mentioned about we're having to be captured by big tech, and I'm quite interested in that kind of cases. And like, for example, is it because of people are aware of their being captured, or like what happens if there's no technology that captures, like there's no monitor that captures people's behaviors, and like what kind of things are being captured? Is the body itself, or like their behaviors, their data of how we use the thing, how we interact with the platform? So yeah, could you elaborate on that? Thank you.
I mean, everything is getting captured. Like,
but I think on a more like everyday note, there's like the relationship with convenience, right? Or like immediacy that you subject yourself to as a result of like wanting something to be easier, right? So like if you think about like the data that you're giving your phone, just on like a very simple level, and like scanning your face to like unlock your phone, right? Like there's so many layers of like giving up, very sensitive information, right, to a big corporation in order to like unlock your phone quicker, or like to like pay a bit quicker, right? So there are things like that. Also, like we rented a studio like a few years ago, and you needed like your fingerprint to like open the door, and like Anna and I didn't even think twice about giving these random landlords our fingerprints. So I think there are like multiple aspects of this, right? Like there are moments where you feel like skeptical, and then there are moments where you literally don't care, and I think you don't even ask that question. So I don't know.
And it's not even like we don't come at it from a place of like fear mongering at all. Like it's not like, oh my god, they're watching us. Like of course they are, and like but like that's not really the point. It's like how do you, going back to what you were saying, how do you kind of carve that space for yourself? And it's no longer about like the whole argument of like hiding your identity and like all this stuff. Like it's not about that at all. It's just kind of, I guess, like a way of being. It's like much more, I mean, it sounds vague, but it's much more of like a kind of like philosophical thing of like surrendering yourself to the stack, like like not lying to yourself that there's any way out of it. That's totally fine, but like what do you do in that space, right? Is it that you're trying to subvert it? Is it that you're trying to yeah, I
mean, I was thinking Alex, who is going to be talking this afternoon, like I guess like talks about the stack in relation to the trap. And I think, I think in a way that is also something that maybe we just have to like come to terms with, acknowledge, like, you know, I mean, if the stack or the trap or planetary scale computation or however we term it, like, if we do take that seriously, and we take seriously that it is operating on this planetary scale, then there's no immediate escape from it, you know. So we sort of have to deal with that as our reality, you know. We could dream of another reality where that doesn't exist and whatever, but the reality that we're in is, you know, I would argue is that. And so, you know, like, it is principally around sort of how do you navigate through that, and like what are the spaces and opportunities where you can find some either momentary kind of relapse or kind of escape or whatever, but or you kind of learn to sort of game it or hack it momentarily for your own sort of pleasure or work or whatever. You know, I mean, a little bit as we were talking yesterday and we were talking earlier, like a little bit like Mixie and Munchie, you know, like just sort of, again, like they're in the stack, right? But they're also sort of found some way to sort of get some weird, obviously deranged kind of pleasure from it. And it's like, again, like, what, in a way, that's what more can we hope for in our current condition? Right? I would sort of argue.
Yeah. Because there's this like prevailing argument of like, well, there's two sides of it. It's either like people that like are like completely like in love with it and like don't even question it, and then there's the people that question it maybe a bit too much and they completely withdraw. And like there is this, and it's interesting to think about the productive way of doing it, to don't do any of those and just kind of be in the middle and like kind of constantly question like when do you turn on and turn off kind of a thing, you know.
I guess it's also like, you know, when we're talking about capture, and especially like capture of the body or our bodies, I guess like another aspect is just to become as sensitive or attuned to and it would probably be in any given moment as well, is like to be attuned to like what aspects of my body are being captured and potentially like for what purpose potentially. So like obviously some of it is kind of physical, but I mean, you know, a lot of the platform is extracting something to then turn into some kind of digital, like a data set of some sort, whatever. So I guess that would be another thing to kind of recognize, or to have some sort of understanding about like what aspects of our bodies are being captured at any sort of different moment. And then, you know, the second question or aspect would be sort of like and to potentially like what ends, like what is it going to be, how is this going to be kind of used potentially. I mean, I guess that was a kind of a question that I had, was like, do you, I guess it was kind of slightly when I was writing the question or thinking about it, I was thinking about the kind of Benjamin Bratton's kind of like the kind of revenge of the real and this thing. But I was kind of curious in terms of like, do you see this the, I guess, like revenge or the return of the physical body in some form? Like, how do you think that the physical body will play, like what part will it play? I was thinking about these kind of, you know, I guess like avatars that, you know, fully kind of potentially like replace the kind of human presenter or whatever it would be. Like, I mean, do you think the physical body will principally be in Deliveroo drivers, riders, and equivalent kind of occupations or activities?
Yeah, I mean, but like the thing is, like, for the way I always access thing is through like the real thing, right? And like it just seems like as much as we can say that like the real bodies will like no longer be there or whatever, I still think, I mean, they will. You know, and I was actually watching, I really wanted to put it in the talk, but I saw this like guy in Thailand. I don't know if you've seen him. He's like a worker. He's like trying to promote this like restaurant, and he's like tied to like two dolls, kind of like a Jordan Wolfson kind of like artwork, and he's just like dancing, and the two dolls are dancing, and like it's kind of like at worst it'll kind of be that, you know, like it'll be like a kind of like the body will be like a prosthetic to some sort of you know?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I don't think we can think about a future where reality is not still how we define it today.
Yeah. No. I guess the other question off the back of that was, I was just reflecting on George Jasper Stone, who was talking yesterday, and he was kind of talking about his kind of process, and one of the things that he was talking about was using his camera. Maybe Jen, also you can sort of like help in terms of all the technical aspects here, but like using his camera.
And attach it as a virtual camera.
Yeah, and he was kind of seemingly like increasingly trying to find ways to almost like include his body in this kind of process of kind of digital representation and he was talking about kind of like trying to find ways to kind of include the kind of intuitive aspects of this kind of process. And so I was curious in terms of how maybe even like with your own work, like are there ways that you are either doing or you're thinking about sort of including yourselves in some way in the work, you know? I mean, obviously, like there is the alternative where you try to sort of automate it, as much as possible. But obviously, So I was kind of curious in terms of like the actual for your own work, like how your bodies, in the most broadest sense, like how do they sort of get embedded into the work?
Yeah, I mean, do you wanna? Because there's ways to answer this in terms of like virtual production shoots that we've done. Where we did work with like a virtual camera that was like a body double of the real camera and things. And like still like to that is like of course our body is included somehow. But the point of that versus the platform stack is that suddenly the body involved in dealing with sort of these technologies is like captured by its need to be literate in terms of like tech. And like this is like something that's emerging now where like if you compare it to like back in the day, anyone could write an HTML website. But now these technologies are getting more and more and more and more and more advanced, and like that is also something that needs to be questioned in terms of like which bodies have access to that. Like obviously our bodies have access to that, your body has access, you know, like but there's, going back to the talk, there's work required to get there. And maybe intuition is a nice way to, you know, convince yourself that you're kind of like at play, like you're playing. But ultimately it's work.
I think in terms of making art specifically, or like making our work, which is, you know, the stuff that you're looking at right now, like there's a lot of that happening just like subconsciously as well. In a lot of these spaces are like derived from like either like lived experience or like, you know, images scored from like real places and things like that, right? But like
and even Veronica and MD, they're actually Seb. And
like the way that we, I mean, this is a bit like unrelated to your question, but like the way that we think about this work is to like really take into account almost everything in the culture of making art, right? So like that's the performative aspect of like the maker or like the artist kind of embodying these characters and like trying to like not necessarily understand, but like to immerse oneself in this digital space in order to like, I guess, bring yourself a little bit closer, you know, to the subject matter, and then as well as that, like just the spatial kind of dimension of actually like making these videos, right? Like putting masking tape on like the floor of our studio and like trying to map that out kind of realistically in space. And I think there's this real relationship, at least for us, with like real dimensions and like real kind of physics that end up making these kind of videos that are like, you know, they might not necessarily seem like anything kind of too bizarre, on like first glance, you know. But in order to like make things that are like mundane, you require, like what Anna was saying before, like this kind of actual tedious labor of like looking at the world and bringing in things that are relatable, you know. But yeah, we try and.
I mean, the studio video with Veronica cleaning, that's our studio.
Right.
So we that was kind of one of the thing of like, and we're questioning ourselves a lot, like, is it too self-referential, is it too, but it was interesting to set up a scenario that we were watching from the outside, this like, you know, hourly paid like cleaner that was probably hired through an app, most likely, kind of, you know, clean the studio while we were at home working remotely. And we just decided that like we'll just do that. So that is the closest like episode to our kind of like lived experience, really.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I was thinking about, you know, the sort of you sort of mentioned the sort of you didn't say romanticism, but the sort of, there is a sort of romanticism attached to this notion of sort of intuition and whatever, and it can be something that, especially like artists, creatives, whatever, use as a way to, I don't know, but you could also see the flip side of that as being like potentially that notion of sort of intuition. I mean, I'm sure it's already happening and will increasingly happen, will itself become highly valuable within the stack, because it provides this kind of novelty or like a new data set or a new kind of set of kind of practices or modalities. So I think that's also something to be very like aware of, at least, for sure. Does anyone have any questions?
I kind of have two, and one of them's, I guess, more opinion-based and the other more factual. But in light of this, like this idea of immersion within like kind of new tech, things like that, where do you see it heading, kind of, I guess, factually, versus where would you like to see it heading? Whether that's like in taking into account the human psyche, physical emotions versus like computer-generated things, just anything like that. Like, I'm always really interested in kind of getting both of those perspectives, if that makes sense.
I mean, I would love for it to happen. Like, I would love to upload myself to some weird cloud owned by Zuck, absolutely, just so I can like see what's up, you know.
See what's going on.
Like, just walk around and suss things out.
But you can already do that on whatever it's called,
we don't have legs.
Horizon World.
We
right?
don't have legs.
No.
No.
But also, it's like it's not like a big step from like what we've been experiencing for like the last 2 decades. In terms of like
whatever.
You know.
But the real question is, it comes down to those hazmat suit guys. Like, I mean, again, like going back to like really practical terms, like literally like computation, because that's what it requires in order to make it happen. Like, until we have like Devs, I don't know if you watch Devs, the TV show, like until we have the giant beautiful golden quantum thing to power like whatever, it's you know, or some sort of, you know what they're doing now with like planetary scanning, where like they're like, oh, we don't have quantum, but we can like link up like all these satellites as a kind of hive mind. So there could be a situation where like we don't get quantum anytime soon, but we all somehow like come together as a giant hive of 8 billion people and make it happen, you know.
I think I think it's really difficult to imagine like where, or like to predict where like products will go, right? Or like things like emerging technologies that are like on the horizon of like you know, and it's just, and I think there's something to do with the fact that we always kind of hope for like the utopian version of like technologies, right? And the reality is that they always kind of get, you know, controlled or like owned by someone. but yeah, it's I
Where
think
do you think it will go? No, I'm genuinely curious.
On that note, guys.
Like, I'm just curious.
To be honest with
Yeah.
you, I feel like there's, because throughout like my undergrad as well, like something that I was always like looking into was how fine is the fine line between like you like using a word in like utopia versus
Yeah, nice, yeah.
you know, like when you watch Black Mirror and you
Yeah,
can
yeah.
see like those really like awful twists or things
Yeah.
like that. And I think for me, like, it's always kind of been on that very fine line.
Yeah, yeah, nice, yeah.
And again, like you said, like it is difficult to kind of predict. However, I'd like to see it go obviously more in like the positive and the detrimental direction, especially like in like sustainability and stuff as well. Because something that always interests me is like when you hear like about like all the supercomputers like containing all the data and all things like that. How expansive can that get? Whereas it's like not something you can necessarily always hold. Like when you see it like up on the screen there, you know what I mean? So I just think it's really interesting, the idea of similarly to like what's in like your mind as a human psyche when you're immersing within that. It's like how physical can you still be within that?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, completely.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I was just gonna say early on that I think regardless, like there's a sort of psychological impact that's already happening, right?
Oh, completely, yeah.
Between like perception, like just notions of perception and like not really being able to distinguish like the language of these two things, right? Like it's no longer this or that. It's kind of like in the long kind of duration of memory, like you'll think about experiences just as a whole, so there are things that you even kind of play on video games that are like informing your memories, or like the doom scrolling that you do on Instagram that like somehow like trick you into believing that like that was something that you maybe heard in a conversation or something, right? So like I think there's already something happening, whether it's good or bad, that our notion of reality is like subject to like multiple layers of like physical, digital, like.
And in that sense, like going back to the delivery driver and the consequences of like, I think there were like 3 or 4 deaths of gorillas drivers in Berlin. It's like we're already so immersed, like if like we are super like 20K immersed right now, like so to speculate on where it will go, it's kind of like big tech can do its thing and like we can have the meta whatever horizon, but at the same time you also have this, which is pretty immersive.
Yeah. And I think it's actually quite problematic maybe to like situate yourself in like the genre of like the 80s, or like with people like William Gibson and like Neil Stephenson and stuff, like talking about the metaverse, because it's kind of that was just a projection of like what technology could be, and I feel like a lot of ideas still kind of spring up from those books and ideas, and it might not have actually seen like the sort of like I don't know web the way that we experience it right now as like a possible future, so I actually think we're in a slightly different trajectory to that. But again, the guys at Meta are pumping so much money into this, like surely they're going to end up with something good.
With legs.
But I guess also, I mean, like this would also, I think, like connect also again, like maybe like to our bodies and whatever as material things is that also there's kind of like material limits as well, just in terms of like the development of these technologies, like there's a kind of limit to what's referred to as like critical minerals that are absolutely essential for any kind of computational sort of devices. And there is right now there's kids mining in the Congo for cobalt. In Chile there's like lithium reservoirs, etc. Like there are like hard limits, so there is there's also that, and I think also that we also have to read it in relation to our own bodies having hard limits as well. Like, you know, I mean, I always remember, and I kind of, like I'm kind of skeptical of some of his work, but like I always remember like Franco Bifo Berardi like talking about like he in a very very boomer-esque way, sort of like, oh, the onset of the internet is all this, whatever, Frank, cool, Bifo, fine, but he did talk about it as being like this kind of like, we are kind of like lab rats, like we are being tested on is like, what is the absolute limit of like this psychic sort of limits of the human body, and I think like we do also have to recognize that, like so, and that warps what is then kind of produced technologically. I mean, I remember years and years ago, a friend of mine who was like he was a product designer or engineer and was like working for Motorola at the time. This was like 10 years ago. And he was like, you know, doing these phones and blah, blah, but like he was very much working with the technicians and the engineers. And he said at the time, he was like, you know, because we were talking about like how the phone had developed in terms of the shape of it and the form of it. And he was like, the thing is with it is like, it's principally it's determined by the battery, right? Like the battery kind of determines everything in this thing. And he said, like, from their projections, there's no sign of it being this is about 10 years ago. There's no sign of the battery like being completely revolutionized. Like, okay, they can tweak it and they can make it more efficient and blah blah whatever, but you're kind of still stuck with this thing, right? And I think that still holds true now. You know, like we're still stuck with the fact that actually all these things are powered by these batteries, and they have limits to them, and they wear out, and all of these things, and because they're material entities, right? So I do think like and then that warps what kind of technological developments actually are possible and actually kind of realizable, I guess. You know, so I mean, I can't imagine. Well, I actually was working for like on sort of like Web 2.0 like platform type of stuff back in the early mid 2000s, and there was no, I mean, absolutely the promise of platform was not fucking doom scrolling on Insta and like TikTok. Like that was not that was not the vision, and that's not what people who were designing these things and building these things had in mind, right? But here we are, you know, like doom scrolling in this weird whatever. I'm not saying that in a judgmental way. I mean, like
we all do it.
I actually enjoy it. So it's like whatever. I don't give. But you know, that wasn't part of the vision. So I think
it's like smoking.
Any other questions? Oh, and there was just one last thing. I was just thinking when you were talking about the hazmat suits, I was thinking like it just struck me what was kind of super interesting and maybe also is very telling or significant is that in that context with the quantum computers, it was like the computers were being protected from the dirtiness of the human.
Well, exactly.
And it was kind of like this kind of complete shift in terms of like the role of that suit. So I think that's also like possibly useful as a useful sort of symbol of like the kind of relationship now that it's
like completely reversed.
So I don't know.
It's also the same. One of the reasons why the Dell fans have to be fixed on my Alienware laptop is my cat fur.
Oh right.
Really?
There you go.
And it's just like there is that. I don't know how to just protect the computer. It's more precious. It's more precious than myself. And I feel grossed out by seeing dust inside the computer. But I love those suits.
they're really good.
Like,
but also it's like just to end on it, like on this note of like fragility of all of this stuff. I mean, if we think about because it's kind of self-reinforcing, you know, like the sustainability questions, like going back to what she was saying, and like the climate problems that are generated by these things are also the things that are going to kill these things, right? Like a massive weather event, or like a giant earthquake, or like, you know, massive fire. they're so fragile,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like a bit of dust can just like
yeah.
ruin all of it, you know. A bit of cat fur can like implode your, you know, like your computer has been struggling so much in the past few days and it roars, you know. Like, have you ever heard
It's
a
like in
computer that's
pain.
like
It's like-
tired? It's scary, you know. So I think it's like, yeah, super important to think about that and like our bodies in relation to that. No?
Yeah, I remember hearing about in years ago, I guess like 2020, I guess it was, the wildfires in Australia.
Yeah.
Someone, I was listening to a podcast from someone who was in Australia, and they were saying they moved to their parents' house to kind of avoid the massive air pollution, and where their parents were had just suffered some of this fire or whatever, and they had been all internet access had been destroyed. So for like 2 weeks, no one in this area had any internet whatsoever, and the only form of communication they had was like radio.
Yeah, well,
And,
yeah, there you go.
And so people would like either communicating with each other on a one-to-one or whatever place, or via radio. And it just, I was like, fuck, like
It's the first one to go.
Yeah. And we're so sort of like reliant on them. We think it's so stable, but like it's just like anything else. It's completely fragile. So yeah. Okay. So thanks very much.
No,
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks.